Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, the conclusion of a story that rocked an entire nation and beyond. A little boy spent the night at his grandparents'. When his mother returned to pick him up in the morning, all three were gone.
She gets into the house and then she finds a horrific crime scene. Something very bad has happened to her mom and dad and to her son.
An Amber Alert has been issued for the abduction of a 5-year-old male from southwest Calgary today.
We don't know the motive behind this. Right now, we have 3 individuals who have disappeared under suspicious circumstances. The vehicle was seen in the area the night of the incident, driving in the area several times, and we believe that the person in that vehicle may have information that will assist us in our investigation.
The search led police to a rural property near Airdrie, about a half-hour drive northeast of Calgary and the Liknes home.
Today, the one man police consider a person of interest has been released from jail. Bail for Douglas Garland was set at $750.
It's your prayers, it's the kind messages that you're sending. This is what's helping get us through as a family.
Here now is Nancy Hixt with part 2 of Hunted by Evil.
Four days after the Amber Alert was issued, there was still no sign of Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents. The property where the suspect lived was 40 acres. To help narrow the search, investigators brought in a cadaver dog.
Immediately he showed a lot of interest in an area that looked to me like a burn pile. He circled around and eventually sat at that pile. We continued on working, kind of going east to west and west to east in a north direction, trying to serpentine our way through the wind. And as we started to move that way, we came to a burned barrel. And he showed a lot of interest around the barrel. His tail was wagging, you could see his breathing was changing, his nose was down, he was back and forth. And he ended up sitting there as well.
Sully became frantic when he reached an area between the greenhouse and one of the outbuildings.
It was kind of a green space amongst a bunch of outbuildings. I had never seen Sully act this way before. His tail was, wagging frantically back and forth, and he wouldn't stop. He just kept going around and like back and forth, back and forth. And to me, in my experience in dealing with dogs and that training there, it gave me a bit of an indication that there was a large quantity of odor there, almost to the point where he was overwhelmed. He couldn't pinpoint an exact location because it was everywhere.
Meanwhile, Douglas Garland was charged with identity fraud, unrelated to the Amber Alert. Police photographed him and took note of 4 injuries on his forehead, upper lip, right thumb, and he had a large bruise on his right knee. His shoes were also seized and sent away for forensic testing. A few days later, Garland was released on bail, with the condition he not return to his parents' farm as the search of the property continued. The 54-year-old was under constant surveillance. 2 days into his release on bail, officers watched as he drove out to his parents' property. Constable Jamie Parhar works in a covert unit now, but on July 13, 2014, she was a rookie officer working a night shift.
Our sergeant, the guy that's running the street, he asked for a unit to volunteer to help with a traffic stop for a surveillance unit out in Airdrie. We're told that the vehicle that he is in drives into the entrance of a field and that he gets out and starts walking.
Douglas Garland was on foot going through a field headed for his parents' farm.
It was pitch black. And I mean, it's straight up rural land. There are no street lamps, it's just pitch black. So you have the lights from your headlights in front of you, and that's really all the light that you have. And we ended up getting to a fence that, like it was a barbed wire wooden fence, and it would have destroyed our car if we had tried to drive through it. So we just said, we're gonna have to go in on foot after this. So I'm trying to track this guy, can't see anything.
High above them, the Calgary Police Hawks helicopter captured the dramatic foot chase with its infrared camera.
I don't want him to know where I am just as much as he doesn't want me to know where he is. All I had in my mind was almost a cat and mouse, like, I'm gonna catch you, I'm going to get you. And that's all I really had going through my head, was where is he so I can get him. That's what you sign up to do. You sign up to catch the bad guy. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to catch him.
Garland was down on his hands and knees, crawling to try and escape, when covert surveillance officers pulled up in a truck.
They called the suspect out to them, and my partner and I went in the trees and kind of flushed him out.
At 1:30 in the morning, on July 14th, 2014, Douglas Garland emerged from the thick bush. He dropped to his knees and laid flat on the ground. Parhar, along with her partner, took him into custody.
So an RCMP member was waiting at the road when we got out, and we transferred custody of the suspect to RCMP, and RCMP charter caution for murder. So it was at that point that we knew he was arrestable for murder.
Coming up after the break, with murder charges pending, police revealed the news everyone was dreading. As the search for evidence on the farm intensified, details of Garland's sordid past emerged. Here's Nancy Hixt.
2 weeks to the day after the Amber Alert was issued, it was called off. All hope of finding 5-year-old Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents alive was shattered.
The decision was reached that this is now a homicide investigation.
Well, motive is something that everyone is very curious about, but at this point, Police Chief Rick Hansen stressed over and over that releasing too many details could compromise the investigation. So they're going to have to wait to let those details come out in the court process.
If somebody out there is thinking that there's one piece that's the smoking gun, one piece of information that has led to a break in the case, I'm here to tell you that this has been the compilation of an immense investigation.
Later that night, Douglas Garland was formally charged with 3 counts of murder.
Mr. Garland, can you tell us what happened to Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents? Can you tell us where they are? Do you plan to help police find Nathan O'Brien to return him to his parents? Do you have anything at all that you'd like to say? Mr. Garland, do you want to make any comment? Mr. Garland, do you have anything you want to say to Nathan O'Brien's parents? Where is Nathan O'Brien? Do you have any comment?
Nancy, you can see it over your shoulder there. The memorial outside the Liknes home continues to grow tonight.
There's been a steady stream of people stopping by, and people just want to show some sort of gesture to show their respects for this family. There's been so many people just clinging to hope in this case, so people want to drop something off. They've been dropping off flowers, cards, balloons, and a lot of people have dropped off toys and a lot of the toys have significance. There's several superhero figurines in the pile that's been left here today, and that represents the superhero that Nathan was to his parents.
3, 2, 1.
On July 15th, 2014, green balloons were released all over the city in honor of Nathan, Alvin, and Kathy. A special event was held at a park where Nathan loved to play. His parents held each other, their grief beyond measure. At the same time, the search of the Garland farm continued. Desperate for answers, Alvin's son, Alvin Liknes, joined in the efforts.
We got to lend support to Dad, Kathy, and Nathan as well. We got to bring them out of wherever they're. Recovering the bodies is very important for the family to end this stage of the crime. We've been in contact with the RCMP around the Garland's farm, and so they provided us the culvert map, which was really handy.
He focused on land east of the Garland property, with an emphasis on areas Garland's truck could have been able to get to.
A truck that is not in good repair and that can only go so many places, like it's not a four-wheel drive. I'll be doing a grid pattern as the roads come up. I'm looking for disturbed earth. I'm looking for rock piles that look like they might have been moved in the last little while. It's a needle in the haystack out here.
As the investigation continued and weeks passed, we learned more about the accused triple murderer.
He had a criminal record going back to 1988, mostly crimes against property. But during the 1990s, a really interesting thing occurred. So Doug moved into methamphetamine production, right? And the RCMP raided his place. He flees and he moves to British Columbia, and he takes on a secondary name.
Garland assumed the name Matthew Kemper Hartley, the identity of a 14-year-old Alberta boy who died in a car crash in 1980.
And he also makes fake credentials for himself, right, from universities. He's actually able to get hired into a chemical laboratory. So he's doing chemical analysis, and he actually works his way up as a manager.
Court records state Garland suffered a breakdown in late 1997. The RCMP caught up with him in 1999, and he served a few months in prison for drug and identity fraud offenses. Garland then moved back in with his parents on their farm just outside of Airdrie. That's where he was introduced to Alvin Liknes.
Alvin Liknes and Patty Garland helped to introduce him to Alvin. And Alvin knew that Douglas was very smart, and he needed help with a patent for something he was building to assist in the oil and gas field. And Douglas did work on that item that was later patented. That item never made any money, although patented, never made any money, never made it anywhere, was never bought or sold by anyone. And the work that Douglas did, certainly I'm sure very much assisted with that patent, but it wasn't all of the work done. He was not the sole creator of anything.
Family said Garland developed a grudge towards Alvin Liknes, a grudge that continued to grow and fester over the years. The question was, would Garland kill Alvin and Kathy along with their grandson over a petty grudge? As the search of the vast Garland property continued, forensic investigators began to get lab results back from the evidence found in the Liknes home.
So the DNA of Alvin was found mostly in the master suite, and based on the fact that there's a drag trail from the master suite down over that first level of stairs, would indicate that he was probably initially hit in the bedroom and then dragged down, and then he would have been impacted again at the base of the lower level. The impacts to Catherine were quite significant in that front bedroom, and that she had been moved around several areas within the residence before she was dragged out of the side as well. Just based on the layout of the house and the blood patterns that were there, it looks like she was moved from the front bedroom down to that first landing at the base of the first stairs, and then through the kitchen down over the second set of stairs to that second or the first lower level where the garage and she was laid in that room as well.
Then there was the handprint found at the top of the stairs.
Because the handprint was in blood, and the blood did come back to be Nathan's and his grandmother's, Catherine's. So it showed that he was there when the incident was occurring, but it also showed that he was still alive.
The fact that it had some movement or drag of the fingers along the wall and at the height that Nathan would be seemed to show that he was steadying himself at the top of the stairs before going down the stairs, which would show again that he was alive at the time.
The footprints left in blood matched a Dr. Scholl's Delta II shoe. That would become key evidence in the case. Douglas Garland's DNA was not found at the Liknes home, but evidence discovered at the farm could explain why, including Tyvek suits, the kind worn by crime scenes investigators. Initially, police couldn't find a point of entry at the Liknes home. There was no broken window or broken door. But a closer examination of the home revealed how the suspect got in.
That's when it was noticed that the door lock on the side door had been drilled. The lock had been drilled twice in two locations. The second hole was actually what destroyed the tumblers to allow the lock to be opened. The whole lock was taken as an exhibit and collected, and later on we provided that to, we took photographs as it was stripped and taken apart, and that was examined by one of the engineers who designed the lock.
Investigators also tested Garland's green truck, the one that matched the vehicle caught circling the Liknes home on CCTV.
So we sprayed the chemicals into the back of the liner and the back of the truck. We took the tailgate off, we took the license plate off, and we sprayed all of that looking for positive results. We had at least half a dozen areas that had a positive result with a blue star, including the back of the license plate. And when I sent a sample of that license plate to the lab, it came back with Catherine's DNA.
They also tested the shoes that Garland was wearing when he was first arrested. Alvin Liknes' blood was found on those shoes. Back on the Garland property, searches continued on and off well into 2015, when officers could be seen down on their hands and knees, combing through every blade of grass.
It sounds crazy, but they found evidence.
In May of 2015, following a preliminary inquiry, Douglas Garland was ordered to stand trial for 3 counts of first-degree murder. Despite exhaustive searches, the bodies of Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents Alvin and Kathy Liknes were never found, and what happened to them remained a mystery until January of 2017.
After the break, could the prosecution prove first-degree murder charges, despite the fact no bodies had been recovered? Finally, in court, the truth about what happened to Nathan and his grandparents would be revealed. Here's Nancy Hicks.
Today, the triple murder trial for Douglas Garland got underway. And a warning, the details in this case are disturbing. Global's Nancy Hicks is at court with the latest. Nancy?
Linda, this is the very first time details of the death of little Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents Alvin and Kathy Liknes had been made public. So as you can imagine, it was extremely emotional in court, and the victims' families have been living a nightmare. And I warn you again that the details are very disturbing.
Co-prosecutor Vicki Faulkner delivered an opening statement that painted a picture of a planned and deliberate murder by an obsessive and methodical killer, and gave an overview of the chilling evidence found at the Garland farm.
Alvin, Catherine, and Nathan were not found. But what stood out to the RCMP members during their search was a large burn barrel that was smoldering, and as well, a bag that was found in one of the outbuildings. A bag that appeared out of place, as it was the only clean and new-looking item in the mountain of old and dusty possessions. What was in the bag? Handcuffs, a dagger, and a leather baton. Evidence is found all over the property. DNA of all three is found.
The Crown's theory was that Douglas Garland violently took the three victims from the Liknes home, then killed and dismembered them and destroyed their bodies on his parents' farm. More than 1,400 exhibits were seized from that farm. Court heard on the 5th day of searching, police found a hard drive hidden in the rafters of the basement of the house. Information on that drive provided a window into the mind of Douglas Garland.
Meticulous, painstaking research about murder, how to kill without emotion, research on torture, research of the Likneses, their social media, the classified ads for the sale of their furniture, and a Google map with a pin showing the location of 123 38A Avenue Southwest, the Liknes home. He methodically researched not only ways to kill, but weapons to kill with. Not only how to perform autopsies, but tools to perform them with.
There were also repeated searches for ways to manipulate the exact lock that was drilled out on the Liknes home.
When we say on June 13th that he started researching the Schlage BE365, we had that surveillance video, and those officers who went and looked at all of the surveillance video kept going through it hour upon hour upon hour, and they found on June 12th. On June 12th, that old green Ford truck drove past the Liknes home. On June 12th, that truck, we believe, stopped, and he went and looked at their home and saw that they had the Schlage BE365. And then, after we see his truck, on the late hours of June 12th, we see his research solely focused now on that Schlage BE365 and how to defeat that lock.
Police also traced Garland's purchases.
Following his credit card purchases, we saw purchases that were of interest. And they wanted to make sure that they were following his credit card and him making those purchases. And so we did have him there. We had him there purchasing a meat saw, purchasing what's called posy straps, which are straps which are used to help move large items. He purchased a set of knives, a set of butcher knives. So we see those purchases that match the research. And what we also saw from his computer is you can see the times that he researched the tools, and coincided with looking at his pictures of gore, looking at his pictures of diapered and restrained women. So each of the research would go back and forth between those horrific photos, the research on how to commit these offenses, and the purchasing of those tools. I can't say what happened at all, but what I told the court, what I tell the jury, is what we found and the research that was consistent.
CCTV evidence showed Garland's truck as it left the Liknes home and headed towards his parents' farm.
We ended up with 50 CCTV footages that we had to go through. We were able to trace that truck by movement from the time frame that we saw it around the area of the crime scene, not right at the crime scene, but pretty close where it was parked. We were able to trace that truck by CCTV all the way out to Airdrie.
Garland's truck was captured on video passing by the Liknes home just after 3 a.m. on June 30th. CCTV showed a figure get out of the truck at about 3:20. About 2 hours later, a figure was seen walking back to the truck. Next, the video showed the vehicle leave the area and head north of the city. At this point, the truck had something white in the box. CCTV traced the truck's movements north of the city towards Airdrie and the Garland property. Then, at about 7:30 that morning, the truck was back in Calgary, driving in the opposite direction with no contents visible in the back of the truck. Court heard that as police continued their painstaking search of the Garland home, they found a multitude of books.
They're actually very frightening what's in there. The Be Your Undertaker book describes, there's a number of chapters, it describes how to dispose of a body, how to get rid of different methods of disposal. The Silent Death book describes how to commit homicides and not be caught. There's different techniques on how to kill people without getting detected.
Senior Constable Ian Oxton spent 2 years working on this case. It took that long to go through the evidence recovered from the Garland property. He said from the moment he entered the farm, he was met with one horrific discovery after another. In the basement, investigators found key evidence that tied Garland to the footprints found in blood at the Liknes home.
We found the shoebox, big bright yellow shoebox in the corner of the room, stacked on other shoeboxes, but it was the Delta size 13 that we knew was at the crime scene. The shoebox itself didn't contain the shoes, but at least we had the box. We had a link between the crime scene now and that room.
Investigators never found the Dr. Scholl's shoes, only the box. Police believe he destroyed them. The shoes he was arrested in, the ones with Alvin's blood on them, were a different pair. As the trial continued, investigators described what was found in each of the outbuildings on the farm.
Coming up on Crime Beat, the most horrifying and damning evidence against Garland was discovered completely by chance. That's next on Crime Beat. Welcome back to Crime Beat. And a warning, the final details of this case are horrific and maybe upsetting. Here again is Nancy Hixt.
The evidence that came next was extremely disturbing, but it was critical for jurors to understand the magnitude of what happened to Nathan, Alvin, and Kathy.
So outbuilding number 3, that's one of those, when I arrived immediately I saw there was a pair of rubber boots, there was a pair of green rubber gloves on a barrel, and then just inside the threshold of the door was 2 large meat hooks and 7 knives that had been laid out. And again, they looked like they'd just been cleaned. So I collected those immediately before the search teams arrived. They came back with all 3 victims' DNA. It was Alvin's DNA, Catherine's DNA, and Nathan's DNA on those boots. On the meat hooks, the DNA from Catherine Liknes was recovered, on one of the meat hooks.
One of the most shocking discoveries came from outbuilding number 1.
Well, when I saw the hacksaw, I knew right away that because it was so clean and pristine compared to everything else in that room, but they're all covered in dust. You can see they haven't been handled for some time. And then the back corner of the room is the hacksaw, which is, it's cleaned. It's very obviously been used recently. It is shiny and sparkling. It's definitely been used. So you combine that with the fact that the burn barrel was still hot, that to me indicates that's an item that's been used.
Nearby, police found a bottle of RNase-away, an agent used to destroy DNA.
So the RNase-away is a cleaner that you would use. We use it in our crime scenes building. When we have our storage sites, we clean it between cases to not cross-contaminate. And that's what it's a DNA cleaner. It's to eliminate DNA and RNA from exhibits or clothing or whatever.
Although it appeared clean, forensic tests revealed both Nathan's DNA and his grandfather, Alvin's DNA, on the saw.
Well, that to me is the threshold where it's, okay, well, this is now moving to a recovery and not a life-saving event, once those results came in.
Oxton told jurors about an area known as the South Burn Pit, where the cadaver dog had indicated. Court heard 120 gallons of ashes were seized from the pit. In those ashes were bone fragments and teeth. The possible teeth were sent to an expert forensic dentist for examination.
We had a number of human teeth. He wasn't able to identify them to family members from dental records because of the condition. However, there was one tooth that he confirmed was a child's tooth.
Once the initial searches were complete, officers got down on their hands and knees. What they discovered was horrific and could easily have been missed if they had not used such extreme measures.
The pieces were the size of a thumbnail, and they were just burnt, very fragile pieces of material we could quite obviously it was burnt flesh, but it was very small and very, very fragile. They were both fragments from Kathy Liknes. So I was sifting the barrel later on back at the crime scenes lab, and I was going through the process of screening the ashes, and I came across a piece of material that had a different texture to it, and when I contacted, I realized it was burnt flesh.
Does it go through your mind, what if police wouldn't have got to that property for another couple days? Like, what difference that would have made?
Yes, I think we would have had a fraction of the evidence that we ended up gathering.
Like, timing was important?
Yes.
Then, the most shocking and heartbreaking evidence of all. Images taken on July 1st, 2014, from the air above the Garland farm, completely by chance.
We wanted the most recent aerial photo of that area, mainly to show the jury the vastness of the size of the property, 40 acres, and all of the different outbuildings, because we needed to tell the jury outbuilding 1, 2, 3, the 2 sheds, the burn barrel, the greenhouse. We needed to show them each of those different spots and what significance they each had. So we wanted to pull aerials. They have these cameras that are $1 million cameras that they use, and generally the photo that you take is what we would see of aerial photos. It's like a square that you see and you can kind of make out little buildings, but because of the power of that camera and the power of his own computer, in fact, he was able to, at the time that we indicated an interest in the area and an interest in the aerial photos, he then zoomed in and zoomed in and zoomed in to the photos that ultimately we presented to the jury.
There was sobbing in the courtroom as the horrific photos were shown. Those pictures have never and likely will never be made public, as they were sealed by the courts. The prosecution told jurors the images were as close as you could get to an autopsy photo in this case.
In Crown's opinion and theory, those photos showed the bodies of Alvin, Catherine, and Nathan lying in the grass at the far end of the farm by 2 sheds. They were lying prone in the grass. It appeared that Alvin and Catherine, who were unclothed except for diapers, adult diapers, and Nathan, who seemed to be, hard to say, but seemed to be curled up. Very difficult in terms of the ability of the camera to zoom into that point.
The area shown in the photographs was by the furthest south outbuildings, where the grass appeared to be chemically burned. The following day, when the plane flew over the farm again, the 3 figures were gone. The prosecution argued Garland plotted Alvin and Kathy's kidnapping, torture, and killing. And when Nathan was there, he worked the child into his plan, alleging the 3 victims were then dismembered and burned at the Garland farm. Jurors were reminded of evidence pointing to a struggle in the home and Nathan's handprint on the wall. The Crown argued all 3 were confined and taken against their will to the property where they were killed.
This has been an extremely long day for the jurors in the triple murder trial of Douglas Garland. For nearly an entire day, they listened to detailed instructions from the justice in the case. Then tonight, for about 4 hours, they deliberated before going to a hotel. They are sequestered until they reach verdicts in this case.
Coming up after the break, the verdicts. Would there be justice for Nathan, Alvin, and Kathy? Family and friends of Nathan and his grandparents waited anxiously for Garland's fate to be decided. Here's Nancy Hixt with a conclusion of Hunted by Evil.
The next day, deliberations ended. It took jurors just 8.5 hours to reach their unanimous verdicts.
This is Global News Hour at 6.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. It's been almost 3 years since that missing persons call first came in. Tonight, finally justice for the family and the victims who vanished that night. Douglas Garland killed Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents, Alvin and Kathy Liknes. Convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder, Garland now faces the longest sentence in Canadian history. Nancy Hixt has been covering this story since the outset, and Nancy, an emotional end to this chapter of an agonizing journey.
It's hard to describe just how tense it was in the courtroom as we waited for the jury to come back with the verdicts. You could have heard a pin drop in that room, and then just overwhelming emotion as one by one the jury read out the verdicts, finding Douglas Garland guilty of all 3 counts of first-degree murder.
He received an automatic life sentence with no chance of parole for at least 25 years. But because he was convicted of multiple murders, Garland faced consecutive parole ineligibilities.
Family and friends of the victims applauded in court as the maximum sentence possible was handed down, life in prison with no chance of parole for 75 years. The pain in that courtroom, the pain Garland has caused, can only be called incomprehensible. He will be 129 years old when he is eligible for parole. His sentence first began when he was arrested and charged with murder on July 14th, 2014. So of course, being 129 years old, he will die in prison.
Just hours after his sentence was handed down, while in a common area of the Calgary Remand Center, Garland was attacked from behind by fellow inmates. He suffered minor injuries. Then, just a few weeks later, on the same day he was transferred into a federal prison, he suffered a second beating. Sources said he was later transferred to an out-of-province institution. Garland appealed both his convictions and his sentence.
Good evening. The Alberta Court of Appeal has reserved its decision on whether to grant a new trial for triple murderer Douglas Garland. The man who killed 5-year-old Nathan O'Brien and his grandparents wants his 3 convictions of first-degree murder overturned. Nancy Hixt joins us with more. And Nancy, the appeal centers around how evidence was gathered.
The defense presented lengthy arguments, including the claim that Garland's constitutional rights were violated. Garland appeared in court in person for the appeal hearing wearing a long-sleeve blue shirt and jeans. He's seeking a new trial or convictions for lesser offenses. Defense argued comments made to the jury by the original trial judge about the graphic evidence prejudiced the jury against Garland.
They also took issue with the original search of the Garland farm and Garland's detention by police. And the Crown argued the conviction should stand. The appeal justices reserved their decision.
Thanks, Nancy.
Even after the trial and his triple murder convictions, there are still questions that remain unanswered. That's because there was evidence found on the property, including DNA in the burn barrel, that was never matched to a known victim. Do you believe that Douglas Garland could be responsible for other homicides?
The investigators would love to talk to him about other investigations. You have only so many individuals with this particular psychological background in your society, right? And again, I look at guys like Willie Pickton, look at guys like Clifford Olson, you know, those individuals, multiple deaths of individuals, right? So is there a possibility that Doug Garland's killed before? I would say there's a very good probability he has.
Do you have any comment?
Douglas Garland has declined my requests to be interviewed in prison. The bodies of Alvin, Kathy, and Nathan have never been recovered.
That is our daily prayer, is to bring him home so we know where he is.
Douglas Garland robbed 2 grandparents of their golden years and robbed a 5-year-old child of his future and the promise of what might have been. But their families refuse to let the evil he brought on their lives consume them. Instead, they remember the love they shared. Alvin was driven and caring. Kathy was the glue of the family. And Nathan was their superhero. A foundation in Nathan's name was created so his legacy could live on.
Our whole thing with keeping Nathan's spirit alive is to do good in his honor.
Like, we remember when we needed assistance with the loss of Nathan and her family, and it kind of reminds us that there's many people that need assistance all the time out there, especially children that don't know what's going on or why they're in pain. Or
fundraisers have included Calgary police detectives and Nathan's older brother.
He meant everything. He was my brother. He was fun to play with, and we played a lot of hockey together, so it was great to be out here playing his game.
Just enjoy your children and life, because it's so short, and just have fun with them because they're so precious and you only have them for a short time.
The pain will always be present, but Rod and Jennifer OBrien choose to focus on the good times and do all they can to honor Nathan.
how lucky we are as parents to have this, and to do this for our son Nathan.
I miss our family. I miss having 3 boys in a loud house and seeing the boys just roll around together and just play fight and love each other. And
I miss everything.
Me too.
You know, I miss having him around. He was everything for us, and he still is.
I miss his hugs. I miss brushing his teeth. I miss sitting in his room.
We always knew how lucky we were prior to the incident.
We were certainly so proud of Nathan, and we will be forever.
Douglas Garland appealed the convictions. Alberta's top court has upheld all 3 counts of first-degree murder. His sentence was also deemed fit: life in prison with no chance of parole for at least 75 years. The Nathan O'Brien Children's Foundation has raised tens of thousands of dollars for charities that support kids in need. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
To learn more about this case, subscribe and listen to my Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And for previous episodes of Crime Beat TV, check out our YouTube page or download the Global Go app to watch on your phone.